Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. Another shakeup in the Democratic race for president. Senator Amy Klobuchar is suspending her campaign for the nomination and is throwing her support behind Joe Biden. This comes just one day after former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg called it quits on his bid for the White House. Let's bring in political correspondent Ed O'Keefe in Washington and CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Bo Erickson in Houston. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Ed, let me start with you. We expected to hear from Amy Klobuchar today, but did we have any indication that she was going to suspend her presidential campaign?
We started getting some footsteps, let's put it that way, ahead of an announcement. She had just wrapped up an event in Salt Lake City this morning when reporters traveling with her, including our own Nicole Skanger, were told to stay put and weren't told for a little while why exactly they weren't leaving the venue. They were later told it was for logistical reasons, and then we noticed a tweet from a KCBS radio reporter in San Francisco who said that he'd suddenly had an interview that had been scheduled with her canceled by the campaign. He also noted that yesterday he had an interview scheduled with Pete Buttigieg and had it canceled just before the interview was supposed to happen. So clearly he's perhaps a stroke of bad luck or something. Right. Then we also got word that our affiliate, our local station in Minneapolis, WCCO, also had an interview abruptly canceled. When those kinds of things start to happen in this environment, that's a signal that something is clearly up. And what we were told just a short while ago, in fact, is that the senator is now flying from Salt Lake City, where she is for this morning event, to Dallas tonight to join the former vice president on stage and endorse him. Wow. The remaining question left hanging now is, will Mayor Buttigieg do something similar, or will he withhold support? We have been working the phones all day to try to get some sense of when or if it might happen and when or if he might go to Texas to join the former vice president. We don't know yet, but that news could come at any moment. Still, the Klobuchar decision caps what was a really remarkable campaign for the senator, someone who had been in the mix most of the past year, never had the widespread name recognition or donor network that other candidates had, but ultimately lasted far longer than fellow senators, governors, and other notable names that had emerged in this race, partly based on her performance on debate stages in the later rounds in November and December especially. She vaulted into third place in New Hampshire, besting Senator Warren and former Vice President Biden, and that third place finish gave her campaign far more life than she anticipated, allowing her to raise more money and continue campaigning. But now, by getting out today, she saves face. Mm-hmm. She can continue to say that in every election that she competed, because she's withdrawn, she's won. It looked as if she was obviously going to come up short tomorrow, and there has been polling that suggests she could place second to Senator Bernie Sanders in her home state. You don't want to be a home state senator or home state politician in any situation running in a presidential primary and defeated by somebody else, because it could potentially set you up for a primary challenge down the road. That was part of Kamala Harris's calculation for getting out last December. Mm-hmm. Klobuchar now also obviously earns a lot of goodwill with fellow moderate Democrats in the party and potentially with Biden himself, should he somehow be able to emerge as the nominee.
Absolutely. So do you think that there's any angling for a place on the ticket, perhaps?
At this point, everyone's angling for something, Tanya, and whether it's the ticket or whether it's something else, clearly it's on her mind.
Right. So, Ed, millions of voters have already cast early ballots in several states. What does her campaign suspension do to the race come Super Tuesday? So
you were smart to ask this earlier, and I doubled back, and we can confirm that, yes, her name will still appear on the ballot in all these states. And yes, there have been early votes cast in places like Minnesota, and down in Texas. Were she or some other candidate who's already dropped out to hit viability or the 15% needed to win a delegate, she would win that delegate regardless. But given that she's now dropped out and the vast majority of people vote on Election Day, and she's expected to say later today that people should vote for Joe Biden instead, we can presume that most of those voters who would have shown up for her will vote for somebody else, robbing her of that viability and handing those delegates to somebody else. Clearly, she calculated that made more sense to do at this point for the sake of the party, for the sake of stopping Senator Sanders, which isn't necessarily a guarantee by any means. But what she can do by getting out is allow others to get closer to Sanders' delegate total, and if not stop him on Tuesday night, potentially catch up and surpass him with later contests still to come this month into April and May.
Absolutely. And, Bo, I'm going to turn to you now. Klobuchar and Buttigieg have both put in so much effort. why not just stick it out until after Super Tuesday?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to be quick here because this event at the Joe Biden in Houston is starting right now. But Joe Biden is someone who Senator Klobuchar was very brief to criticize throughout this campaign trail. The only quite little swipe I can remember is when she said that she differed with his vote against the Iraq war, and that was just a couple of weeks ago. She did not want to stick it out. Sources around the campaign tell me it's because the polls in the state showed her in second place, and also there's starting to be talk that there could be a primary challenge of her next Senate race. And so taking this all together, she thought that it was best for her to get out of the race and throw her support behind Joe Biden. Now, there's a big question about why she is doing it now, maybe potentially going forward to try to position herself to be a VP candidate. One longtime friend of hers tells me that that is not out of the calculation for her. And so we can kind of take from that what you may, if that is a part of her decision.
Right. So interesting because she certainly catapulted herself to the national stage, and she had, as Ed mentioned earlier, those two very strong debate performances. So in the end, where do you think that Klobuchar's candidacy fell short, Bo?
Yes, well, the whole structure of her campaign was an underdog campaign from the start, and she said that she had grit, and that is how she was going to get her name ID up and continue to raise money. Debate by debate, her campaign aides said that the strategy was just continue to try to introduce herself to the country. And we saw that the polls tick, 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 tick up. She focused her campaign being from the heartland, being the best to win back those states, which she called the blue wall that she was going to build and make Donald Trump pay for. She was going to be the best construction manager for that. But she did not think that if she lost Minnesota, that would be a viable narrative going forward.
All right. Well, Bo Erickson, we're going to let you go so you can cover that Biden event there behind you. Thank you so much. Ed, please stick with us, though. Klobuchar is flying to Dallas to endorse Biden, as you said earlier. With her campaign suspended and Buttigieg dropping out of the race on Sunday, will this immediately help consolidate the moderate vote for Biden?
I'm glad you asked that question as well, Tanya. We can actually cite what is now outdated polling information, but gives you some sense of where potentially people would go. And I'm just pulling it up here as we talk. As with Pete Buttigieg, based on polling we had done in recent weeks, it seems that both Senator Warren and former Vice President Biden are set to benefit the most. Because when we ask in our Battleground Tracker surveys, okay, you like candidate X, who's your second choice? In the case of Klobuchar, it was either Biden or Warren. Now, that is data, we should caution, that was compiled before the South Carolina contest and before these fluid developments of the last 24 hours or so. But it signals that the kind of person that Klobuchar was attracting is more likely to now go looking for either another woman, in the case of Elizabeth Warren, who is more liberal, or former Vice President Biden, who is an equally, if not more so, moderate Democrat, somebody who comes out of the same exact lane. Well, for Buttigieg, the second choice option was Warren, which is completely different both ideologically and from a gender perspective. And the second choice option for Buttigieg voters, if you follow me, was the former vice president. Right. So conceivably, when it's all added together, yeah, it could very well help the former vice president if you believe this CBS polling. It's one way to look at it. Of course, we won't know ultimately until we see the results tomorrow night. We may never really be able to accurately characterize who was a Klobuchar supporter today that had to change their mind ahead of tomorrow. Right, and of course, this all brings up the question of Warren. So now, is Warren splitting the Sanders vote or the Biden vote? It looks like she might be doing both. And by staying in now and surviving, right, and thriving in essence, because she's still been able to raise significant sums of money, she now stands as a real viable alternative to the other remainders in this race: Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Mike Bloomberg. Tulsi Gabbard is still in the race as well, but has been mostly a non-factor throughout. She hasn't really been able to demonstrate that she's removing support from somebody else. But with Warren now in this for the longer haul, given that she has the money at least, and potentially could do very well tomorrow in her home state of Massachusetts and in some other states across the country, a strong third in California could depending on how the math works out, get her a few hundred delegates. So she could jump there from 4th in the delegate race to easily surpassing Pete Buttigieg tomorrow and vault into 3rd, especially if she's passing Mike Bloomberg in places like Texas and California. And this shows you what's happening now to Joe Biden hour by hour by hour since South Carolina. Establishment and other leaders of the Democratic Party falling into line behind him. A press release in now from the office of the former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid saying that he now believes that Joe Biden should be the Democratic nominee. Our party was fortunate to have a tremendous field of talented candidates this year, many of whom are my close friends, Reid says. I have the deepest respect and admiration for Senators Sanders, Warren, and Klobuchar, and Mayor Bloomberg. They're among the brightest leaders in our party, and they've made invaluable contributions to this race and our country. But he says that the candidate who can assemble the largest, most diverse coalition possible to defeat Trump and lead our country following the trauma of Trump's presidency is Joe Biden. So again, that's happening now on an almost hourly, if not sort of minute-to-minute basis, where people across the Democratic Party who have stayed on the sidelines are now jumping in, and they're picking sides. They're either with Bernie Sanders or they're with Joe Biden. And I can tell you from months of reporting, these kinds of endorsements sort of waiting in the wings to be revealed at a dramatic moment like this have been in the works with a skilled team of people who work for the former vice president, talking to these kinds of people, saying, when would be the moment that we could convince you to do it? You saw it over the weekend in Virginia with Senator Tim Kaine and former Governor McAuliffe and a handful of members of Congress who all endorsed Biden after the South Carolina results. Now Harry Reid, who can do it with Senator Klobuchar out of the race, and with only Sanders and Warren left, whose politics don't necessarily line up with Reid's own. It's indicative of where things could be headed here going into tomorrow night.
And of course, President Obama has yet to endorse anyone. What do you think he's waiting for?
And that's not expected. We have asked every day. There has been some reporting on this over the weekend. The former president insists he's staying out of it, does not want to put his thumb on the scale, knows that in some ways it actually could backfire, and has said in interviews and through spokespeople that, look, he's been in the position of these candidates where he would not have appreciated some party elder stepping in to try to influence the results of the race, that it has to be won at the will of the voters and through the skill of the candidates themselves. However, when or if there is a nominee, clearly coming out of when, not if, there will be a nominee, we just don't know how clean it'll be. He intends to serve as a unifying figure, someone who can try to bring the disparate parts of the party together depending on where things are at the time, and is willing to go out and campaign or speak on behalf of the nominee, whoever he or she ultimately is.
And that statement notwithstanding, one has to wonder whether Joe Biden actually feels the same way, because he often invokes the Biden-Obama presidency.
He was asked by our Caitlin Huey-Burns in an interview a few hours ago about that yet again. And he told Caitlin that he had said, and he said this before, he had told Obama, don't get involved, stay out of this. I wouldn't want a former party leader getting involved either. We do know that the former president and the former vice president did speak Saturday night after the South Carolina primary results. That much we have learned. The contents of that call we don't know, but no surprise that the former president would probably check in and congratulate Mr. Biden. That much we know. We don't know beyond that necessarily what was discussed. And again, we check on an almost daily, if not every other day basis with the Obama team amid reporting and rumors and other things that we've heard, that there's no reason to believe he has any plans anytime soon to step into this race.
A swiftly shifting landscape. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for keeping us up to date.
Take care.